Hello, my name's Adam Novak and we'll now have a quick look at 3D object types in Blender. The main object type that we manipulate is the 3D mesh. This is most often our model that we create using the faces and vertices and polygons, editing them to make the mesh and the object that we like. There are many different object types. The most common ones will be the curves, the text, the armatures, empties, the camera and the lamp. The camera is pretty straightforward. It is the viewpoint for when you render from, making our final screen. The armature being bones for manipulating our object and making more complex animations. Text just being text in the 3D environment. Curves being manipulated by a handle and point rather than the polygon edge face. Objects all have an origin, and inside the objects can be one type being the mesh, curve, or etc. Here's 3 different types of objects being the camera, empty, and meshes. All of them have an origin signified by this circle here. It's a dark circle at its point with the arrows. When we rotate our object or manipulate it, it will scale and rotate around these points here. The objects can be found in the outliner. As you can see here, in this case I've selected the camera most recently, and here is the name of the object. Its transformations can be found here so that we can manipulate the object as a whole. And also in its object properties panel we can see its name and its location, rotation and scale again if we'd like to edit it here. We have to push N to open up this transformation panel inside the 3D viewport. Here's a quick list of some object manipulations and modifiers. The most common ones being parenting, grouping, using modifiers which you'll use a lot. Here's 2 cases of modifiers being the subsurface on the left and the bevel. As you can see, it adds some nice geometry, making it look really neat. Constraints are also really cool, and linking objects from multiple sources so that multiple people can work on large projects at once is very important in large projects. Here's a tracking constraint where it has multiple objects being tracked to a single point, being an empty. So now let's have a quick look at some object types and manipulations. Here's the mesh, which we'll be most familiar with. The curve, as we can see, is being manipulated by a handle and a point. Points being the center and the end. And we can rotate and scale the points. Pushing V, we can make it a vector aligned or change our alignment. And we can turn it back to free so we can line it again. By joining the curve together, we can make it full. So now we can manipulate the object, making some very smooth alterations. We can increase the resolution of it and decrease it, giving us smoother options. We can add a plane, scaling it down, deleting only its face. And we can now, using a few little tricks, add a modifier and an array. We want to use this to fit the curve and then use the curve to displace it. We can also add a mesh, being the monkey, moving it out the way so we can see it. And then add a modifier. We can add a subdivision modifier. So now it looks nice and smooth. As you can see, the geometry goes up very quickly as I put up these modifiers, quite exponentially. I can parent this object to the monkey. So when I move the monkey, mesh will move with it. But because the curve has an array modifier according to its location and to the location of the mesh, as I move the curve, it goes off location. and ruins this modifier. If I want to make an array using the curve, I'll have to also select the curve using shift, then parent that to the object. Now I can move them together. Now it will follow all manipulations done to the monkey. As you can see, when I scale up the monkey, this object here scales up at the same time. This is because the two objects do not necessarily share the same relationships. One may be scaled by a different proportional amount to the other one. We can apply the array, so it's now applied to our object, remembering to remove doubles once we've applied modifiers. We can now also do something really cool. We can now add bones, if we'd like, to an object. Being called armatures. Selecting the bones second, we can do automatic weights. So now that when we manipulate the bones, the objects get manipulated with it. We can also add different objects, being perhaps a cylinder and a circle, add a plane, new particle effects, limit 50, make this a group, Control G, and we're going to emit the group. So now we push Alt A, we can see if I increase the size, there we go, you can emit the particles of the objects from the group by making them a single group. If we'd like, we can also render our scene, adding our object, a camera, and a lamp.